You're listening to Katrina Wills from K-Wills Creative, and this is Exploration Echoes, Tales from the Underground. I'm talking today to Andy Spate, who...
Hello.
Hi, Andy.
Hello, Katrina.
So I've known Andy for many years now, going on, I think, 20 years or more. Back in the days when I worked at Narracourt Caves as a tour guide or site interpreter, or as Steve Bourne used to like to call it, his education officer. And I met Andy through ACKMA. So, Andy, what is ACKMA?
ACKMA is an organisation of cave people of all walks of life, from scientific researchers to cave guides to people who go caving for pleasure, people who manage caves, and people who are very keen on having them conserved and managed and looked after properly.
Yeah, and so ACKMA is actually an acronym, isn't it? So what does it actually stand for?
Australasian Cave and Karst Management Association, Inc., if you want the full title.
Okay, and why was it formed?
The Australian Speleological Federation had held 4 conferences on cave tourism and management, and the Speleo Federation is primarily cavers, people who go recreational caving, although of course there are scientists and so forth who belong to it. But the late Ellery Hamilton Smith, wonderful man, and I were concerned that people who managed caves and people who interpreted caves had no window, no forum to talk about issues which confronted them and ways that we could move forward to improve things. So in 1987, I and Ellery convened the 5th Australasian Cave Tourism Conference, which was a mobile conference. We got in buses, little buses, and travelled visited all the show cave areas in New South Wales, all 6 of them. And at Yarangobilly on the last day, we held a meeting in which we formed ACKMA to, as I say, to represent that wider group of people than just cavers.
So you were one of the founding fathers?
I would claim that, yes, with Ellery. But of course, there were others at that meeting who became important in what was to become ACKMA.
Yeah.
The late Ernie Holland, for example, was enthusiastic supporter of it. He was from Jenolan Caves, and played a very major role in the early years of ACKMA. I should point out that it was the Australasian Cave Management Association at first, for the first year, or might have been first 2 years, at the assistance of a New Zealand cave person who didn't think we should put Karst in it. And 2 years later, if it was 2 years, he said we must put Karst into it, which was an interesting improvement.
Yeah.
To cover not just caves.
Yeah. And that leads me to my next question, I guess, or a couple of questions. So why is an organisation like ACKMA so important, and what are some of the interesting things that ACKMA has been involved in over the years?
Well, the important thing is to get people who are involved in caves meeting one another and understanding what's going on and finding solutions to problems. For example, in the early years, I travelled around Australia to various cave sites like Jenolan and Chillago and Margaret River and so forth, and gave a 2 or 3 day introduction to caves and karsts, their values and the science behind them and how they formed and all of that sort of thing. And that was an extremely valuable approach. And I think at that stage we had much more involvement with cave guides and cave management authorities such as Jenolan Caves than we do today, which is a great pity. But that was an exciting time and an interesting time. I actually prepared a 120-page sort of document on Australian caves and karst and how it was formed and so forth. And I presented that on 11 different occasions, and that was 11 different modifications. So it was quite a big effort, and I'd love to be able to do that again now, but A, I'm too old, and B, I haven't got enough money.
Yeah.
but the importance is getting the wider group of people who are involved in caves together, not just cavers and their concerns, which are valid, of course.
Yeah.
But so are the concerns of management.
Yeah. And I
So
mean, some of the things that I recall that ACKMA has been involved in over the years might be little things, like providing connections for cave guides and allowing us to talk to each other at different sites and go, well, hey, how do you deal with this situation, or what do you do here, and that sort of thing. But a really important thing I've noticed, especially in the later years, is things like saving Clifton Caves, the Save the Nullarbor campaign that's currently happening. ACKMA is heavily involved in things like that now, isn't it?
very, very, very much so. It's changed dramatically. Possibly there's a greater variety of potential threats to caves and karst across the world, and it's become necessary for us to become very much more involved. And for example, in the last 12 months or so, we've probably prepared 6, 8, 10 submissions to various government organisations concerned with looking after caves and so on. It really has become quite hard work for only a very few people in the organisation who have the background and the expertise, but it's something that's being done very willingly because there are many threats.
And I'd like to point out here that your time in this organisation is voluntary, isn't it?
Indeed, very much so.
Yeah.
And well, everybody is involved or volunteers in that way. Even if they are employed in a management situation, they're probably not so much in many cases representing their management organisation, but their own ideas and roles within those organisations.
Yes. Yeah. So where does your story fit into ACKMA? When and where did your interest in caves start?
That's a little bit confusing. I think my first cave with Urangabilly Caves, well, with my father, who was travelling from Canberra. He was at the ANU. He was travelling to Wagga to talk to what became the Charles Sturt University. Very much it wasn't Charles Sturt University, and we camped at Urangabilly on the way. And I remember my first trip, which was to Jersey Cave. But at once around about that time, Cotter Cave near Canberra was open occasionally as a show cave. And I certainly visited that. But I moved from Canberra to Melbourne, and the lady next door to where we were living gave me a copy of 10 Years Under the Earth, which I still have about 2 or 3 metres away from me at the moment. That book was really the thing that stimulated me to be interested in caves. And then I moved back to Canberra, and in my father's Department of Geography in the ANU he had imported a geomorphologist, Joe Jennings, who was mainly interested in coastal landforms and so forth at that stage. But he'd been a caver in Britain before the war, came to Australia about 1954, and became interested in caves and started surveying caves at Wee Jasper. First of all, the Dip Cave, and then Punchbowl Signature System, and somehow I got involved with him at Punchbowl Signature and spent many a weekend in that cave with Joe, just the two of us surveying it, and that relationship broadened very considerably over the years, and we did a great deal of work across Australia on various caves and karst issues. until his very untimely death. And in fact, I think of Joe Jennings virtually every day. A remarkable man, great human being, wonderful sense of humour, and a very loud laugh to go with it.
Yeah, and I'm sure those listeners who may have known him are now reminiscing in their minds as well about him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, without giving away your age, if you don't want to, how long have you actually been caving? What age were you when you started?
With Joe at about 16.
Wow.
So if you subtract 16 from 78, you'll get the right number.
That's a remarkable amount of time, Andy. Yeah. So, what's your actual training and profession? And have you? I think I know, but my listeners don't. Have you gone on to do anything professionally in the cave and karst area?
Oh, yes, very much so. My qualifications are a degree from the University of Canberra in natural resource management. I leaving the University of Canberra. I went to CSIRO for about 10 years as a experimental officer there, mainly concerned with landscape rehabilitation, repair of damage and that sort of thing, but a number of hydrological issues which have always interested me. And lo and behold, in the Canberra Times one Saturday morning, there was a paper, an advert calling for somebody to join the New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife Service as their cave expert, which was a bit of a surprise. I applied for that job. Many months later, I received an offer to take that job. But as I went at the beginning of the period to be interviewed in Queanbeyan for the job, the then regional manager Bruce Lever stopped me in the reception area and said, "Sorry to have to put you through the interview process, but you're going to be employed on this position anyway, whatever the interview committee says." I found that rather astounding, and that was Joe Jennings and sundry others who'd been negotiating behind the scenes to have some professional advice of the New South Wales Park Service. And that lasted for 22 years until I, quote, retired, unquote, and set up my own consultancy in cave and karst management. And I'm still doing it, although I'm not charging people any longer. I'm doing it out of the goodness of my heart.
Wow.
But that led to consulting opportunities in a number of countries overseas. New Zealand, obviously, is overseas. I'm not sure whether we should talk about it as another country in that context. Oops, I've upset the Kiwis now. So I've worked in Papua New Guinea, Vietnam, South Korea, Malaysia, a couple of countries in Europe, and South Africa, all to do with cave and karst management and interpretation and guide training.
Wow. So, do you have a favourite cave, or is that too hard?
That's a bit like asking who's the most beautiful woman in the world. If you answer it, you offend all the others.
Yep.
And B, it's so difficult to say. I mean, I'm very fond of Jersey Cave at Urangabilly, having spent a lot of time there and conducted various research activities in it. One of the caves that I did a lot of work in here in Tasmania, Kubla Khan, very much up the top of the list of wonderful caves I've been in. But no, I won't say I've got a favourite cave.
No.
I probably can't say.
That's a very hard question, isn't it? I find myself, I don't necessarily have one cave in particular that's my favourite, although, as you know, and a lot of people know, Narra Court is always going to be very close to my heart because I grew up there and grew up in the caves and climbing and crawling around in them from a 12-year-old
Yeah.
and visiting them younger than that. But yeah, it definitely is something that's hard. So, okay, I want to delve a little bit into what made you want to go and explore caves and be a cave explorer and go into the unknown? What was it about it?
Quite frankly, I don't know. um, it was a new and different environment. It was something new.
For
You
me,
know,
it's the excitement of the unknown. I'm a risk taker in a lot of ways. In other ways, I'm not. But it's that adrenaline rush when you go through into a space that perhaps no one else has ever been into before, and you're the first person to see it.
Obviously, that's a major thing. I certainly can't claim to have made many major discoveries, but a few here and there. But I think the interesting thing about caves is the number of values that they offer us. Understanding climate change, understanding how things evolve. For example, cave animals, troglodytic creatures. How did they survive? What do they represent in the way of past? Um, little things like tetracycline, well-known antibiotic, or used to be a well-known antibiotic, not so much these days.
Yeah.
That comes from caves originally.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Wow. Yes. So there you have a cave fact, and that was an important drug for many years. Not so much these days.
Yeah, I've been
Um,
prescribed that in the past.
and, and also when you see, well, take guiding a cave, show cave. If you can awake community people, their interest in the natural environment and what they see, not just the decorations in terms of whether they look nice and all of that sort of thing, but what it all means. And well, Naracoorte's a prime example because you can talk about the megafauna and so forth, and that's a new window for many people.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Nullarbor campaign a few minutes ago, where a big industrialisation process is threatening the values there, which have been identified in 1992 as having significant World Heritage values. Most Australians know nothing about Nullarbor. However, a few weeks ago, the Save the Nullarbor petition numbered well over 23,000 people, and that was presented to the national government, national parliament. So obviously, something not people don't know about by and large has captured the imagination of quite a large number of Australians.
Yeah. And something that I'll always remember about you, Andy, is your wealth of knowledge about caves, how they're formed, the different types of formations, how they get their colours, and then even little things like when we went to Western Australia to a cave conference, the ACKMA conference in Margaret River, and we were looking at things that I perhaps wouldn't have had a clue really what I was looking at. And you were there like a giant encyclopedia, just filling us with information. It was fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I do really think that those people who have only just come into cave guiding and perhaps being involved in caves and managing caves don't know what knowledge is out there in the ACKMA organisation, and I think they really do need to reach out to people like yourself and ask for help or ask for information. If they're going to do a development in a karst area, they need to consult with ACKMA because you guys are the experts.
We like to think so, and I think to a very large extent we are. as I mentioned, I think we're going through a bit of doldrums at the moment with involvement with cave guides and so forth. We do conduct every couple of years a conference. The next one's coming up in September in Wellington Caves in New South Wales, and that in conjunction with those, we've been conducting guide training schools in association with the Savannah Guides, a magnificent organisation in Northern Australia which trains guides in all many aspects of the wonderful environments across Northern Australia. So we are still making those opportunities available. Hopefully, Wellington, September, the 2-day school there will be well attended. It's certainly very good to be working with a really good professional organisation like Savannah Guides, who have been going since 1988, I think, and vastly improving the interpretation of the natural environment across Australia, I can now say, because for example, quite a number of our cave guides have been to Savannah Guides training schools, so they've picked up those skills and that knowledge there.
Yeah. And across Australia, we've seen various natural disasters occurring in recent years. You know, Jenolan Caves, for example, I don't think they're open at the moment because of natural disasters that have occurred and closed that site.
Jenolan is closed. Urungabilly, Wombi and Abercrombie have all been very badly affected. I'm not sure the open status of Abercrombie, for example, at the moment. But no, that's been very dramatic, and Jenolan Caves is particularly distressing in the fact that 12 of the long-term cave guides there have been made redundant, and until further, made redundant whilst the roads are repaired and all that sort of thing. So we've potentially lost 12 times a load of wonderful experience in guiding fantastic caves.
And some of those guides have been guiding for over 20 years at Jenolan. So
yes.
Knowledge of the site is astounding.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
It's very, very distressing indeed.
Yeah.
And not much we can do about it other than mumble.
So down in Tasmania, you have some great cave sites as well.
Yep.
Tell me about those.
Well, if you look at Australia as a whole, we're not well off for caves and karsts, although we have big areas like the Nullarbor and so forth. But Tasmania approaches the sort of world average for density of caves and karst areas, and we have a multiplicity of sites. Some of them, for example, have contributed to the Tasmanian World Heritage Area, Kudakina Cave in particular, with its very, very long-term Aboriginal occupation. But there are quite a variety of very dramatic caves. The deepest cave in Australia is in Tasmania, of 600 or 700 metres. I can't think of the exact figure at the moment. We have 3 show cave operations down at Hastings, south of Hobart, Mole Creek up near Deloraine, and Guns Plains up near Devonport. Guns Plains is unusual. It's privately operated. Most cave tourism operations in Australia are government run, but just a couple are run by individuals in the community, and only one of them is in fact owned by owned by its owners rather than the government. So in those 3 show cave areas, we've got they show just 4 show caves. But there are a large number of other caves in those areas, and we've got a couple of people who run private adventure tours, so-called, mainly at Mole Creek, but in other places in Tasmania as well. So it's part of the community, part of the local economy, and most show cave operations are not near cities, and so they can be quite important economic drivers in rural areas. In fact, of course, for example, at Wee Jasper, there are only now 2 businesses in that little village. One is Carey's Cave, and the other is the new gin distillery, which I can heartily recommend.
Ooh. And yes, I know quite a lot of cavers who enjoy a good drop.
Indeed. It's been good to work in this area, all these years, and being able to contribute to people's knowledge and provide a level of enthusiasm for people.
Yeah.
We've had useful ways of doing that. One is the ACKMA quarterly journal, which has been run for many years and has been very useful in providing background information to people on caves and how they form and management issues and so on.
Yeah, as a cave guide, I found it very useful to read through the journal and even contribute at times to get the word out there about any particular sites or things that I might have been working on. Yeah, so certainly those sorts of things I think need to continue, and having that web presence as well is really important.
Yeah.
So people like Ellery Hamilton Smith, for those that didn't know Ellery, describe him. What was he like?
He was very much a multi-disciplined man. My first involvement with him was in the Victorian Cave Exploration Society, which became VSA, Victorian Speleological Association, later. And he was a caver, originally from South Australia, and his position in Victoria was looking after young people in various roles and things. Went on in later years to be a geriatrician, and but very much multi-skilled in a large number of areas. Well-known cave invertebrate fauna researcher. Just a remarkable man with much expertise, a way of getting on with people and contributing to society.
Yeah, I remember one of my most favourite caving trips was during, I think it might have been a Cave Eps conference, or it might have been an ACKMA conference down at Naracoorte, and I was invited along to join Ellery and Steve Bourne and a few others, and we went into the back of Victoria Fossil Cave into the Starburst Chamber. And to me, caving with one of my heroes, Ellery, was just incredible. And yeah, I think we're in there for 5 or 6 hours because, of course, all of us like to talk, and we'd all stop and chat about this and that, and point this out and point that out. And of course, it just takes longer and longer. Hubby was home with the 2 little kids at that stage, and did start to wonder where I was.
Yeah.
Because I think we'd gone in at about 6 or 7 o'clock at night, so didn't get home till something like midnight.
Yeah.
But absolutely fantastic, and that was one of the things that Ellery had time for, even the simplest questions and the most basic questions. He had that listening ear, and he was happy to chat and give you information and history of caves and cave areas and different things. And And yeah, I really don't want to see that lost.
Yeah, yeah. It's unfortunately we get older,
Yeah,
and one thing we're having trouble with in ACKMA at the moment is getting younger people involved, and there's not so many opportunities for people like Ellery and myself to get involved in these things. I mean, for example, look at the ACKMA journal. It used to be printed, which meant it could be left on the tea table at Jenolan Caves or Naracoorte Caves or wherever, and people could dip into it. It's now electronic
yes.
for financial reasons, which even if it does go to Naracoorte, does it reach out to the guides? And I think not in many cases.
Yeah, I fear not.
Mm.
Um, knowing some of the guides there and knowing that I've asked them and said to them, have you read the latest article? And the answer has been no. Didn't know it was out yet or didn't
Yeah,
even know about it. Some of the newer guides don't even know about it, which is sad.
yeah,
I think we need to get the word out there to all cave sites and all
yeah,
all areas of government as well, and all other areas like tourist information centres. Their staff, if they've got a cave site in their area, they need to be trained about, well, what can visitors expect, and
yeah.
all of that as well.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Um, and we need to do more in that area, but uh, people are busy.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
don't know the answer to getting more members. It's a common problem across lots of organisations, and certainly not-for-profit organisations like ACKMA. For example, I was even talking to an ambulance officer down at Orroroo in South Australia when I was down there last, and they have one paramedic who's paid, and the rest of their team is volunteers. And they were looking for more volunteers because they don't have enough people to go out on calls.
yeah, yeah.
And no, they're struggling as well. So if organisations like that are struggling, how do we get people involved? And something that I've noticed over the years is there's at one point in time in ACKMA, there were so many different people involved that weren't just working in caves. They were perhaps they were a doctor, but went caving on weekends, and so joined ACKMA because of that interest. Or they might have been an entomologist, an insect expert, and they didn't necessarily work in caves but joined ACKMA because they might have wanted to do some research in caves and found the connection there, or had done research in caves. So what do you think, how do we get the word out there? What do you think? Is there an answer?
I wish I could find one. The answer is actually, well, in terms of showcase, is actually going to each site and sitting down with managers and 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 guides and so forth, and talking to them and explaining things to them. But as I say, that I'd love to be doing that and would do it in a flash. But I don't um, um, don't have the energy and for
Mm.
health issues, um, and B, I don't have the money to do it. And um, we, we basically, I think we're lacking charisma. Um,
Well, let's hope we can get some more of that back into the organisation, because I do believe at one stage we did have charisma.
yes, we did. I mean, people like Ernie Holland, was a strange. I don't mean that in a derogatory sense at all, but was a man who could work up an immense amount of enthusiasm in people, and his enthusiasm would rub off very, very very well. And we need more Ernies around in this world.
Absolutely. And if anyone's ever gone on a tour with a lot of cave guides, their enthusiasm rubs off on you while you're on tour with them. And I've certainly had lots of wonderful experiences with some very talented cave guides out there.
Yeah, it certainly are.
Yeah.
And but hopefully things will improve.
We
We've
certainly
got
hope so.
yeah we've got AGM coming up shortly, and there'll be some interesting things at that, I think. And I think the conference at Wellington will be quite an interesting one. We've got a brilliant keynote speaker in Angus Robinson, the Director of Leisure Solutions, who's the Mr. Big of geotourism in Australia at the moment.
Oh, fantastic.
A very useful man to have involved in these sorts of things. So that'll be very good indeed.
Yeah.
And next year we're off to Chillagoe, which will be nice in May. And that will be a very good. That's not a conference meeting, but just our off-conference year meeting, and that's being run by, amongst others, Dave Gillison, a very fine man in the cave world in terms of cave research,
Yeah.
and also in management and knowledge purveying. So that'll be very good.
Yes, I know that David was heavily involved in the management plans on Kangaroo Island after the 2019-2020 bushfires, and yet another example of how an ACKMA member can be involved with a government department in writing policies and procedures and those sorts of things. So certainly a wonderful wonderful man.
Yeah, yeah. So there is some talent around, that's for sure. But hopefully we'll get some more come on board from wherever,
Yeah.
and hopefully down the track things will improve at places like Jenolan, and we'll be able to build there.
Yeah, build that back up again.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, I think we might wrap it up there, unless, of course, you have anything else you wanted to add, Andy.
I don't think so at this stage, Katrina, but maybe something will come to mind and I can get back to you.
Well, what I might do at a later date is I might do an Andy Says segment, um, and go back to some of the old archives and talk about some of the things that you used to talk about in Andy Says.
But fine, that'll be fine.
Yeah. All right. Well,
That certainly covers a lot of ground.
it does. Well, thank you very much, Andy.
My pleasure.
That was Andy Spate, one of the founding fathers of ACKMA, the Australasian Cave and Karst Management Association Incorporated. If you'd like to know more about ACKMA, maybe join or go to one of the conferences, or maybe you've got some skills that you can add to the group, jump online and have a look at ackma.org. Thanks for listening.